addiction to taking it seriously is thinking we're some saint or some purified being that's come to awaken the world, or thinking that we're going to become spiritually advanced in some way, or we're going to become an amazing meditator. That's taking it too seriously. Not taking it seriously enough is not doing it at all, is the condition of the entire world, folks. Not the entire world, but 99% of the world who are just drunk on this self, addicted. Hey folks, different kind of episode today. You're joining me at my meditation cushion, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about enlightenment and the unserious side to enlightenment. So where to begin with this topic? Goodness me, it feels like there's a lot that could come out here. I guess on my spiritual path so far, I've fallen into a particular trap, which is that of idealizing enlightenment. It's believing in all the sexy language that we hear about enlightenment and awakening and consciousness and pure being and nothingness and whatever, and discovering your true self in all of this. And what I'm here to do today is to kind of share the opposite perspective, to not to say that all of the theories and all the fancy language isn't important as a pointer, but at some point you maybe have to let go of it, and you maybe have to realize the unseriousness of all of this. Okay, let's see. So if you let me define enlightenment as realizing who you really are and realizing the falseness of your ego, what's been obvious to me in the last recent while is it's almost like realizing you are just a character in a film. You're not the character. So let's think of when Tom Cruise plays a film character. I don't know if you like Tom Cruise or not, but that was literally the first actor that came into my mind. When Tom Cruise is playing a character, I'm pretty sure that most of the time he remembers that he's actually Tom Cruise. He's not the character that he's playing. Despite the fact he's got a costume on, despite the fact he's maybe changed his voice, he's maybe using words that he would never normally use, he's in situations that he's never normally in, he doesn't forget the fact that that's who he really is. He's Tom Cruise. That to me is a good analogy for what enlightenment is like, or this particular facet of it, this particular level of it. It's like realizing you've been plugged into a 3D world with a subjective experience. You've been plugged into the world of your senses, sight and sound, and then your body and your mind, and the sense of linear time as well. You realize you've been plugged into all of that your entire life, and that all of this isn't actually who you are. And again, this sounds very sexy, but the experience is not that sexy. It's kind of like realizing the thing you've been looking at in the mirror is a like a facsimile. It's a facade. It's a caricature of your pure self. What is your pure self then? Your pure self is just the pure openness. It's like the backdrop. It's like the container for everything that you're experiencing. But what happens is, and I have to thank Michael Singer, who wrote The Untethered Soul, for showing me this, because I've never seen it explained so clearly before, is that basically we get addicted to all of the content. We get addicted to our mind that creates this extremely strong sense of identity. We get attached to our emotions. We get attached to our past and future. Even though deep down inside we know that that's not who we really are, it's so convincing, it's so consistent, it's so it seems so real and it seems to fit with everything else that we're experiencing. And the trouble is that we live in a society that is pretty unenlightened. I doubt if you're on this path to enlightenment, I bet you know few people who are. And if you do, those people are quite special and rare in their own way. After all of this, after doing this for decades of your life, you really have no chance you've got no real choice or opportunity other than to be totally addicted to who you are, to this apparent person, you know, who you are when you look in the mirror, the clothes you wear, what other people think of you, your self-image, your thoughts and your memories and your emotions and your ideas and your desires and all of this. You have no chance but to think that that's who you actually are. Does it mean that that's not who you are? It's a language problem, this, and I don't want to, this isn't about semantics, this isn't about pulling hairs, spiritual, philosophical, theological hairs. Is it who you are? Are you a video game character when you play a video game? Depends how you look at it. But if you truly, the trick to enlightenment is that if you 100% believe that this is who you are, that you have the name that you are called, the person that everyone knows you to be, if that's who you 100% truly believe yourself to be, then it does matter a great deal, actually. So on one hand, the unseriousness of enlightenment is that enlightenment is very ordinary. Nothing in your experience needs to change. No emotions need to change. No, you're not going to get anywhere. That's why it's so unordinary. You just realize the game you've been playing your entire life, which is to try and build up this identity, to take everything really personally, to forget that you're actually the pure beingness. And I know that sounds very sexy, but it's actually not very sexy, at least at my current experience level. You realize the game you've been playing your entire life and how seriously you've been taking this whole thing. And enlightenment is, in one sense, is seeing that you're this false identity, this false identification you have, this human self that you have can never become enlightened, because its whole game is to tie you in. Its whole game is to pretend it's to create an apparent self that is not really there. And this is where we get to the other side of the coin, which is we should take it fucking seriously. And I speak as someone who's had severe mental issues in their life, that taking the human being too seriously, in one sense, it's not serious. It's an illusion. The human identity is an illusion. It doesn't matter. No one's experiencing it. Well, right, that's true to a certain degree. You'll hear a lot of spiritual masters say that, and I think there's important wisdom in there. But also, we should take it fucking seriously, because identifying with this thing, with this hurricane of thought, with the past and future, with your personal history, with this person that apparently is going to become someone, and it's going to get recognized, and it's going to adjust the world just how I want it. Just let me get the world just as I want it. Let me take my emotions very personally. Let me block out my body and my emotions and my thoughts and my personality and my spontaneity, because I'm not going to get accepted, and I can't stand to feel that shit, that emotional shit inside of me. I can't stand that others won't accept me because I'm important. that is a recipe for disaster. There's a quote from Sasaki Roshi. I can't remember exactly what it is, but basically it goes along the lines of, your problem in life is that you believe that yourself is a real thing, something along those lines. And that is absolutely true. And though when you at least have a glimpse of enlightenment, or you have some sort of stability there, you realize the game that is happening here, that the human identity is a falsification. It's like you've got a false ID. You realize that, but you also remember, in my case, how much suffering happened in that entire identification process. The process of being socialized, and I don't mean that in a negative sense, I mean that in the sense that you need to learn how to function as a human being in this video game. The process of learning how to walk, how to talk, how to interact with people, how to fit into your social system, into your society, how to do things in the adult world, how to live responsibly, how to contribute, how to, the difference between contributing and taking and destroying. That whole process is very traumatic. And when you are this thing that believes itself to exist, it's a recipe for disaster, folks. And that is the side that is emphasized in the great spiritual traditions of, a transformation of the ego, a transformation of who you are, which has its validity. And it's important that we don't, subtly, the experience of enlightenment, of being just a character and not being a self, of being free from yourself, of identifying with the greater ground of everything. I know it sounds very sexy, but it's not that sexy. That this can actually be used for really evil purposes, and we don't want that. That's why the great spiritual traditions also have, the ethics component a lot of the time, to use our awakening ethically. But nevertheless, fundamentally, I think part of the enlightenment experience is detachment from yourself, detachment from the world. Not in a negative sense, but just realizing that the world was not exactly as you believed it was. It seemed that way because of how you identified. You're buying into this character that you are. That is a crucial component. Otherwise, I think enlightenment becomes something else. It becomes an aggrandizement of the self. It becomes a cultural thing. It takes on all the spiritual paraphernalia that we're all familiar with, like peace and joy and, smiling and having a certain appearance and having a certain body language, which I'll have to find out for myself, could be a natural result of this deeper realization. But without confusing and conflating enlightenment for, I'm peaceful and I feel good inside, so that means I'm enlightened. It doesn't mean anything unless you realize what's going on here, unless you realize that you are not this thing that you think you are. You're not this human thing that occupies the center of your attention all the time. It doesn't matter whether you feel good or not. It doesn't matter whether your thoughts are scattered or they're concentrated. It doesn't matter whether your mind is quiet or not. It doesn't matter whether everything is going right for this human self. you can still become enlightened. In fact, those things are a kind of test so that you realize, oh, I'm still, even though things aren't maybe going perfectly in this video game that I'm experiencing, this human identity I'm experiencing, my fundamental being is free, regardless of all that. And we should never confuse enlightenment, awakening, with the accoutrements, the externals. Enlightenment is a very internal experience. You realize that there's nothing outside of this character you've been playing. There's nothing outside of this bubble of this character. And there's no one to convince. There's no one to convert to enlightenment. There's no one to preach to. Because they're just the same plugged in characters, the same characters who've mistaken this, the pure potential for the senses and for being, for the human, as their actual identity. Like characters in the film The Matrix, the Neo in The Matrix confusing himself to be Neo when he actually was just plugged into a machine the whole time. The creators of The Matrix, knowingly or not, really captured the essence of enlightenment very clearly there. And you don't have to perfect this human self. That is part of the delusion of the human self, of wanting to get somewhere in life, of wanting to be more beautiful, of wanting to have more, of wanting to have an image to the world. This is all part of the character. It's like playing a sandbox game and you've got all this money and you've got all this stuff, but it's just a game. And ultimately, you're clinging on to something. You don't have to perfect anything, folks. Now, I'm not advocating that if you get enlightened or you have an awakening experience or whatever, that you just start being obnoxious and you disregard other people. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying stop taking this identity so seriously. Stop taking enlightenment so seriously. Stop taking your meditation practice so seriously. Stop taking the idea that you're going to get something from this so seriously. Stop taking the idea of accumulation, of spiritual growth so seriously. If you take it too seriously, you're just not going to realize this deeper truth of who you really are. Who you really are is nothing to do with the content of the human self. It's about realizing that you've been experiencing this content your whole life. It's been changing and you've been identified with it. It's been very hypnotic, but actually this is not who you are. All right, I think that's all I want to say. The main message here is, yes, enlightenment is serious, and I talked about that a lot in this video, why it's serious. And I'll still be taking it very seriously, don't worry. But it's also not serious, and both sides of the equation are crucial here. Otherwise we fall into one addiction with one side or addiction with the other side. Addiction to taking it seriously is thinking we're some saint or some purified being that's come to awaken the world, or thinking that we're going to become spiritually advanced in some way, or we're going to become an amazing meditator. That's taking it too seriously. Not taking it seriously enough is not doing it at all, is the condition of the entire world, folks. Not the entire world, but 99% of the world who are just drunk on this self, addicted. So we find a balance, the middle way, folks. Not addicted to enlightenment, not averse to enlightenment, not addicted to the self, not averse to the self.